Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Housing Tips. It's the show where we talk about housing tips and housing information and everything housing news related. Today, I am joined with my host today, Jesse. How are you today, Jesse?
Doing good, man. Got a little hurt last night, but we are still here, still recording. Got this.
How'd you get hurt yesterday, Jesse?
I play soccer. I always played soccer my whole life. I am not delusional, but I still play in those leagues, like those 30 and up leagues. We're
So
not in
not only
shape,
do you
man.
sell
Everyone's
houses, but you also play soccer as well. You're
yeah, catch
busy.
me Tuesdays and Thursdays at So5 Cabina, and I'll be scoring goals right and left.
That's awesome. Well, today we have a jam-packed show for everyone today. Today we're going to be talking about the big movement of tiny houses, how photographers increase the attractiveness of homes, and finally a CNBC video that explains in some ways why house prices have gone up over time. How does that sound?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Awesome. Let's talk about the first topic today, and that is the movement of tiny homes. As someone who has a lot of friends who have thought about building tiny homes, and I know it's becoming everything on social media, everyone buying RVs, them buying vans, doing the van life on social media. It's definitely becoming more than just an entry level movement. It's becoming something that people are doing quite a lot. As my own experience, I've seen a lot of friends who are buying vans, retrofitting them, and just traveling across the United States. Jesse, what are your thoughts about the tiny home movement, especially the RVs? And then we'll also talk about the other type of tiny home movement, which is also happening in Texas. But what are your thoughts about the van life or the tiny home movement, the movable tiny homes?
Yeah, I'm excited about it. My father-in-law, he always tells me that he wants to buy a bus and convert it and be able to just tour like everywhere or live in it. And at the beginning, I was like, "You sound a little bit insane," but now, I see what he means. Like alternative housing is definitely going to be the way. Um, Tiny homes and ADUs is like a common term that people are putting out and trying to see in regards to just saving the housing crisis.
No, definitely. And then as
So
something
like
like this is what I see is something that's movable as well, where it's not just a van, it's actual like something with wheels on it.
yeah, that'd be like super cool. I don't know just the difference a little bit, but when it's on wheels, it gets a little bit tricky. Like it still needs to meet certain like construction standards. I think it's like the National Fire Protection. There's certain size limits, so it has to be, if it's movable, size limits comparable to like an RV, and it needs to have like the chases and axles, and has to be towable with the brake lights and the hitch. But there's times where they don't allow full-time living, so you're not legally permitted for full-time living unless it's in like specific like RV parks or certain campgrounds. So it can get a little tricky sometimes.
Interesting. No, that's awesome to think about. That is something a lot of people don't think about because just looking at these images, you look at these tiny homes and you're just it's like, wow, this is something that, anyone can do, anyone can just live in. But then like you said, it's not only trying to build the tiny home, it's where you're going to put the tiny home. Because like you said, you can't just drive one of these tiny homes into the desert and say, this is my permanent residence forever now. Like you said, you always have to if you are going to stay there for a bit, you have to start moving after a little while. You're going to have to, you can't just make it into your home. Of course, it is your home inside, but on the outside, you have to keep it mobile so that it doesn't become almost as if you're squatting in some ways. But I was just looking through these, and I know it's a big movement, especially with younger generations, where instead of living in one spot, especially having, remote work opportunities very prevalent and throughout the economy nowadays, I've noticed a big shift of people thinking, hey, what if I just get a tiny home and I just drive across the United States and I just look for different spots, different surfing spots, maybe different camping spots, and then just living in those areas. So what are your thoughts about alternative living of those? It's a lot cheaper, but at the same time too, I think it has its pros and cons.
Yeah, I mean, it offers a really accessible like entry point, like for home ownership. If you're priced out of the market, especially in California, where cost of traditional homes, and being able to just also like sustainability. You have a smaller footprint, like tinier homes, more sustainable, smaller size. Fewer resources to really build and maintain. So really promote that more of like that minimalist lifestyle. And so reduce consumption, reduce waste, as opposed to previous generations, right? Like bigger homes, a lot of upkeep that we've talked about, lots and backyards. And so it's more eco friendly. So then you're able to just kind of get up and go and, you know, new location and lifestyle and visit. That could be like super awesome. You have that flexibility, that freedom, right? If it's on wheels, you're able to just kind of take it and just kind of go and customize also to your liking.
No, definitely. I 100% agree. And I've thought about it too, is especially I just paid my electrical bill and it was almost $300 versus if I had a tiny home, a lot of these people, they just use a generator, they use solar panel. And then I've seen some very intricate builds for these RVs or these like van lives. Well, they'll have like a generator or they'll have battery packs and then they'll have like one of those like a T-Mobile Wi-Fi hotspot boxes or Verizon hotspot boxes. And then they'll actually work remote from different locations, but then they'll use, a generator for their electricity for their laptops, or they'll use like a mobile hotspot to make sure they have internet. And honestly, for myself, all I really need is my computer and I can pretty much live anywhere. And it's just something very interesting to think about that a big movement nowadays is having more freedom, doing more with less. A lot of people are doing, like you said, the lowering of consumption of having these massive houses, massive bills. I'm sure, something that you always talk with clients as well is these people that are buying massive houses, sometimes they can't afford the bills and those things really start to add up. That's something that I didn't even think about either when I first moved into this place is just electricity, gas, water, internet. I just was on the phone with Time Warner earlier trying to lower my internet costs because man, some utilities just become crazy. But
They
it's
do. You need a what's the trick? You need to call them like right before you're gonna extend and just say, "Hey, I'm gonna go to a different company," and see if they can lower
It's
the
actually
price for
really
your bill.
funny. I did that yesterday. I called them yesterday and I literally said, "Hey, I'm thinking about switching to
Yeah.
Fios or fiber, whatever, AT&T. I just think it's too expensive. What can you do for me?" And the lady over the phone actually dropped my internet price by $40 a month just by calling, just by calling. But I
Wow.
know this generation is really big on not talking to people, so maybe that's how they get people. They slowly get rid of the discounts, and then if you call, you'll get a discount. But until then, it's very much, you got to do what you got to do. And then if it keeps going up, people just deal with it. For someone like myself, I have no problem being on a phone call. And I just called it up. I was just very friendly and I said, "Hey, this is too expensive. I'm thinking about switching." And within 10 to 15 minutes, they're able to give me a discount. So definitely think there's different options when, looking for utilities. But man, look how nice this tiny home is.
I love the bathroom, like the
I
clear
know.
glass, the backsplash in the back.
Wow, it's like a
It's
full-on
gorgeous.
house.
Even
And look at that. It has a washer dryer in its unit as well. As someone who's like looking
yeah,
for another condo, another house, sometimes they don't even have washer dryers, or they put the washer dryer like in the kitchen, and so it's in the
true.
middle of
Like
everything. But wow, that's awesome though. But moving on from tiny houses, though, I did want to talk about another sort of tiny house that's also been very popular recently. I know a lot of friends, a lot of family that are looking through, different options of housing. They're actually looking at ultra tiny houses, and this is one of the big ones that was on social media. They're selling for around $100,000, but yet they're extremely tiny. I think it was saying something along the lines of we're looking at a few hundred square feet, but for $100,000, you have yourself a house, you have yourself, everything you need in one of these. I know they're really small, they're very, very narrow. There's very, limited opportunity for growth in those types of locations. But what are your thoughts about these,
yeah.
Jesse? Where we're going from not just an RV or a van life, but into a real home, but extremely small home.
About how many square feet did you say the average tiny home is?
Yeah, so let's see. Looking through it, so we got 350 square foot homes in San Antonio, Texas.
San Antonio, Texas. Okay.
Yeah,
So typically 200 to 400 square feet, probably.
yeah, very small.
Okay.
But I mean, how many bedrooms have you saw? These have one or two bedrooms in there as well, plus like a loft of some sort. So
Nice. Nice.
really
I
depends.
assume that that the homes really focus on like extreme space, like efficiency. It's just like, you know, the just like the one that we were just looking at, like being able to really use, multifunctional furniture and just really clever like storage solutions to really maximize like every inch. I mean, if I look at my home, it doesn't maximize like every inch. It's just
Yeah,
kind of like room and the space, and
yeah.
it really doesn't maximize. And so I think it could be like a really, really good solution. The design has to be key, like hyper focus, essential living. If it's a bed that folds into a wall, or a table that doubles as a desk, and just really be able to reduce living to bare essentials can be really key. Like really efficient. It can be flexible. It can be comfortable, and just a lot of mobility and purpose, I think, is going to be key for these tiny homes.
No, definitely. And I agree. I've seen some of these as small as what was the ones we were looking at? Yeah. So this one's 350 square feet, but I've seen some that are in the 200 square feet. So we're looking at like a size of a room maybe, but they're double decker. So, I guess you're expanding it, correct? Is that, if I'm wrong, it's like the square footage, but then it's a double sided
Mhm.
house. But very interesting though. I mean, here's one that's for sale. We can watch this video.
I have a unique home to show you. Come on in.
So this is one right here.
Okay. Back to left.
Interesting. Wow. So it's like a really nice house, but just really shrunken down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very modern amenities on this.
Like
Very,
really compact.
yeah. Interesting. That's pretty cool. I mean, definitely something of interest to some people. I mean, I definitely think having something, even for myself, when I bought this place, I was willing to forego a bigger place, but to have something that was really small but really nice versus having something that's really big, but then you have to worry about this or that. Or, my main thing to worry about is, man, electricity is so damn expensive during the summer, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the tiny homes, and I think the other homes, the alternative ones are going to be crucial. I don't know about the ones on the wheels. Like now that I'm thinking about it, just if they're classified as RVs, if they need to meet like DMV standards, or because a lot of areas don't allow tiny homes as permanent residences. So you need to have specific foundation types. You need to have certain like square footage, or other standards. But I know like major cities like LA, San Diego, San Francisco, Oakland, like they're really just, open it up, to those type of living standards. So I'm excited just kind of see the new wave, of ADUs, tiny homes. Like I think that'll be a good solution to the housing crisis.
Now, do you think it would, and this is something I've always heard, this is, and of course, correct me if I'm wrong. I've always been told that the reason why tiny homes aren't very they're not as seen as being constantly pushed out as single family homes is that these builders actually don't make that much money on these tiny homes, and that builders really prefer to build the biggest home possible in the square footage that allows them, because then they can mark up the price, they can charge more per square foot, and then that leads to them making more profit.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it just spot on. Like they're focusing on higher end homes and just really trying to maximize, higher profit margins. And so, like affordable housing initiatives like that doesn't sound lucrative to a lot of people. and they're not, you know, spitting out and kind of building just standard like lower cost homes. And so, you know, we noticed a big change just kind of during the pandemic, and just kind of builders, and just how the market has shifted and changed and really affected housing for us.
No, definitely. And that's especially in California. You know, everybody wants a single family home in California. But I agree, like, there's lots of land in California that they could definitely support, 10 or 15 houses instead of one single family home, or, maybe five, or maybe a duplex or triplex of some sort. But I know builders, they just really only care about maximizing profits. They put $1 million house on the market versus $250,000 homes on the market. There's always spots being cut out, and they just don't make as much money. But it's really disappointing to see, though, because I agree, I definitely think with these large plots of land, instead of people that can't afford $1 million house, but they can definitely afford a $250,000 home. And I do hope that one day we can shift more towards that. Maybe the government, maybe California, maybe the federal government could help and say, hey, we're going to give the builders, we'll cover the interest while they're building it out, or they're doing something, or passing different zoning laws, like we talked about in our first episode. Another shameless plug: in our first and second episode, we talked about different types of zoning laws. And I do hope that zoning could be changed, that we could build more housing so that more people can have more options. Because I am a strong believer in the free market. The more options out there, the better, because whatever's the best usually floats to the top. But that's just what I've always thought about what the housing market can be. But taking this into a whole nother direction, though, moving on to our third topic, is the movement of professional photographers, professional videographers on Zillow, on house postings, where they're actually wanting to, make images of houses look fantastic. As someone, when I bought my first condo, I definitely looked at some of these houses and I said, wow, looking at this, like, this is fantastic. Look how green the grass is. Look how blue the sky is. There can't be anything wrong with this property. But then when you finally
Mhm.
look at the other photos and you look at them and you say, wow, you know, I guess the sky isn't that blue. I guess these trees aren't as green. But what are your thoughts, and what have you seen in your professional advice when seeing these professional, either, the images are cropped, they're very photoshopped, or when the new thing I've seen happen is where they put virtual furniture into these condos nowadays and houses.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's editors are great, right? They can really help, you know, make your listing really pop, you know, especially most realtors, we don't like to do all the editing and all that fun stuff, you're right. So we're needing to kind of delegate and get support in that. Now, the key is to really price your property correctly, depending on, you know, the condition, depending on the comps in the area. And I think some people do a little bit too much, or feel, I don't know, that emotional connection, or feel bad about, you know, their property, and are trying to edit too much. If it's like adding all this stuff, or adding furniture, or, you know, altering the photo too much, and then people get to the property and they're like, this is not the same house, right? So the key is being able to see, you know, the condition, not having that emotional connection, and being able to price the property correctly. And hey, there are agents, there's companies that can help with rehab and can split the difference if your property is sold at a higher price point. Let's say if it was 700, if in the condition right now, there's companies that will invest like their funds, and once it sells at the higher price point, there's like a split that you guys will agree upon. And that's something, if people are wanting to do, they don't have the funds. But yeah, I've seen some where they add in like the sky and birds and furniture and a backyard, and when they get there, they're like, there's no backyard, it's just dirt, what's going on here?
No, definitely. And so, in your thoughts as well, as someone who's, actually, I had one question for you, though, that you just went over, though. What is a comp? As someone who,
Yeah.
I hear all the real estate agents, I hear all of the loan officers, and whenever you look at houses, everyone says, oh, that price is not right because of the comps. Look at the comps, the comps. What is a comp?
Yeah, a comp in our real estate lingo is a comparable. And then what's a comparable is a property with the same similar dimensions, square footage, rooms, you know, in your area. And so you want to be able to price your property based on what's going, if it's the market, if we're seeing, things change, if we're seeing, properties in your area, same dimensions going for like 750 and you're wanting to price it at like 850, it's not gonna really add up. Also, comps are important because if the bank comes in and they're gonna appraise the property and they say, hey, this property is only worth 750, then that buyer is gonna need to come up with, 100,000 out of pocket to get the property. It's gonna kill the deal. And so a lot of the time sellers will get a little bit upset wanting to price it, very high. But we really study and look at the comps and look at the area just so that deal won't, just die, just so we are able to make that property close. So that's kind of like the conversation around comps and comparables.
Interesting. Awesome. So I just pulled up on Zillow. Of course, it's not as good as the MLS. I know it's not as good as what the loan officers and everything use, but so a comp would
Yep.
be if you went to, for sale and you looked at some of these condos here, and then if you went to like sold, for instance, and then you're like looking at how
Yeah,
much these other condos sold for.
correct.
And I know that
You want to look at
every
sold.
no, definitely. I know
Yeah, you want
every
to look at
property has.
sold and the dimensions and similar, bedroom square footage. And if the other properties have more, that's not a comp. This one has extra additional square footage, so you need to account for that. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. That's actually a great question. So for instance, let's look at, this one, for instance. We're not gonna go through the entire image, but this one says it's 2 beds, 2 baths, and it's for sale. What does it change if, for instance, let's look up another one. So this one is 540,000, but then if we look at the sold and it says this one sold for 497, what's the biggest difference that sometimes happens between those? I know one of the big things if it has less rooms or less square footage, but obviously there was a big difference between what this actually sold for versus what this person's posting it for.
Right. It's a lot of different factors. Also, they can take like the cost approach as well. So see if there's any, adjustments to see if the property has any specific repairs, where it's remodeled and to the liking. And so then that appraiser can see, okay, this one has the updated kitchens and flooring and these adjustments, and this is why, I'm giving it, this value. Or this one at like 497, but also it's outdated. So they have to kind of take that approach in regards to, when they're kind of studying and looking at those numbers.
Interesting. No, definitely. That's fantastic to know. I do have a question though too for you as well. When I see properties, when I look at some of these properties that are for sale, do you think sometimes they price it higher and then they'll wait until someone offers them something a small amount lower, but then they'll offer them something lower, but they're still, they can go back and forth with the number. I know that happens a lot with cars where they'll post it for a higher number, but then they're willing to take a much lower price, but they just want to see if anyone, because that feeling of, hey, I can't drop it 10%. I could drop it 5%, but then that still gives the buyer a win, the seller a win, because at the end of the day, let's just say hypothetically, this person's selling it for 500,000, but they're willing to take, 500,000, but they put it for 540. But then if they get negotiated down, they go back and forth. Is that something that you see as well, especially now with more houses on the market? We're still in a very much housing shortage, but a lot more inventory than when I bought my condo, and a lot less competition. What are your thoughts about that?
Right, right. Market was very different when you were looking for a condo during that time. It was things I had never seen, and people who were overbidding, 150,000 over asking and getting rid of all their contingencies. And so it was a very strange time. But no, I mean, I feel like it's more the sellers that have that emotional connection and want to sell to the highest possible. I mean, who wouldn't want to, right? If you're in that position and you're thinking about, I need to pay off this loan, I got to pay off this commission, I want to park this money into a different home. So people want to get more bang for the buck. that makes perfect sense. But I always strive on, you want to price it correctly. And the moment that you start to see that a property is on the market too long, it's because it wasn't priced properly. And
Interesting.
you're trying to see, yeah, like people want to see if they grab bait and if people kind of lower to the amount, but it may get stuck and it may like stay there for a longer time. And that's going to cause you to lose more money too. So how can you price it properly? How can you remove that emotional connection and, get that deal sold? I think it's very key.
Interesting. So bringing back on the conversation you're talking about, when I bought my condo, it was in 2022, and I know that there was just getting out of the pandemic, and I know a lot of builders stopped building houses during the pandemic. It's actually the next topic and the final topic I wanted to talk about was during the pandemic, a lot of individuals ended up a lot of these smaller builders, the builders that don't build as many houses, they actually got gobbled up by these big house builders. And it's a fantastic video. I'll definitely share it into the comments. Anyone can check it out. But it's actually titled, why the US can't build homes fast enough. And this is actually something extremely interesting that I saw is that during the pandemic, if you look at these houses, at, for instance, Las Vegas, it's relatively close to us, but the top 10 builders own 90 to 80% of the market of these house buildings. And it's such a
Wow.
fantastic video in the sense where what you learn is that a lot of these builders actually purposely slow their building down. They purposely trickle out homes because they know, hey, there's only 10 single family homes being built. Let's have a lot of buyers. Let's have a lot of, a lot of bids going up and up. And I just found it very interesting that before, and as someone who loves the free market, I definitely find it very interesting when, and for instance, like Riverside, San Bernardino, it's the third line from the top. Look at how many of those top 10 builders in the country are building the houses versus everyone else. And less, if there's more of a monopoly, I've always learned the prices can fluctuate however they want to fluctuate. Versus in a free market, the prices will come down for consumers because more competition for builders. So they're putting more incentives to sell a house. But what are your thoughts about how during the pandemic, instead of having more alternative builders, now there's only a few builders that are just building out as many houses as they feel will be enough for that area?
Yeah, that's a big point that you're bringing up. The larger builders, they were better positioned for all the challenges in the market. They have greater access to capital, to land, to supply chain, so they were ready. And being able to merge just really took out all those smaller businesses out. You know, Even in today, all the commotion of the real estate agents, right, and the new contracts and a lot of worry, that's going to push out also a lot of realtors too. And thinking like, hey, like maybe I should segue to other stuff because of that uncertainty. But the bigger companies, they're ready, they're prepared, they have the systems, and so they're able to just really maximize. So instead of really passing then these savings on to consumers because all these smaller builders are being pushed out, they're using that to really dominate their position, to maximize profits by keeping prices higher. And I mean, that's unfortunate for that first time home buyer who's trying to, save a little bit of money and get into a property. And so you hit it on the nail just in regards to them maximizing profits as opposed to really trying to see how consumers can save.
No, definitely. And I do feel that, and this is something that I've always believed in, is that, if we are heading into recession, I know the big R word that everyone fears, but then it could force a lot of these bigger companies to say, hey, we got to crank out more houses for a more affordable price, or we're going to have to break up the companies because we just can't stand on just building one house at a time, and then jacking up the price.
Yeah. And on another point, like I know that during that time there was a lot of supply chain disruptions, like shortages of lumber, like shortages of appliances, and even like labor shortages. But these bigger companies, they were able to attract people and offer higher wages and really consolidate their dominance. And so that point that you said, like the inventory control, like I haven't given that too much thought, but you brought a really big point, like limiting the release, like to keep prices high, like really focusing on those high end homes, higher profit margins, and just not helping with the lower cost of properties in today.
No, definitely. I would 100% agree with that. And that's something I've been thinking about well is okay, so there's only like we talked about in our second video, second episode, another shameless plug. Check out our second episode. I'm going to put it in the comments right here. Is that without a good selection of inventory, it just everything becomes front loaded, like you said. So for instance, I'm just going to share one last thing from Zillow. So these are all the houses under, let's do 500,000, hardly any locations, you really have to keep manufactured open, lots of land open, everything. And before you do it, you come down to, single family homes. There's hardly any single family homes in the area that are under 500,000, but then that artificial piece of control where if you put to 1 million, there's tons and tons of them. So there's a very low floor, but a very high ceiling in Southern California. And you can go over here and you can see a lot of these new builds, and they're all selling, $1 million homes, which very difficult to afford. But I definitely think that what I've learned is that these builders, they just want to keep it as high as possible because then there's less agents to sell, less loan officers to add points to it, less of everything so that they can increase their profit. So very interesting, but it's definitely something I want to keep discussing further and we can keep talking about is hopefully that band between affordable houses and extremely, extremely unaffordable houses starts to compress a little bit as time goes on. That would be fantastic instead of this huge spread where there's hardly anything on the lower spectrum, but extremely high on the upper spectrum, where if you look at this, these are all single family homes over $1 million or up to $1 million. And as you say, we go down to 800,000, some start disappearing, until we go all the way down to something as 400,000. There's only 2 houses in this entire area of Southern California until you really start zooming out and you start going deeper and deeper into the Inland Empire. So very interesting thoughts though. But I did want to bring up one last point. I know Jesse wanted to bring this up, is that there's actually a new development now on mobile home financing from our last week's episode, which I would love to hear more about because even I didn't know you couldn't finance a mobile home or a manufactured home. I thought it was just another type of home. You paid the home and you also paid the loan for the land as well. But I would love to hear more about any updates that you heard, Jesse.
Yeah, so I got in contact with one of my lenders and got some more information on mobile home financing. And so, any questions, you guys can let me know. But some of the main points for that type of financing has to be June 1976 and newer. There are 240 or 300 month term loans, and then the part that surprised me, it doesn't have to be on a permanent foundation on a 433.
Oh, interesting.
And so, yeah, it could be in a park, it could be on land. You have to do a 5% or more down payment, and then depending on your credit score and your down payment, rates can vary. But I got to estimate about 8 to 11%, I think, depending on your down payment and depending on your credit score.
Oh,
So,
wow.
like that's huge too. Being able to get financing on mobile homes, like I had never heard of that before.
Yeah. That's awesome. No, that is at least something. I know, a lot of people like to, especially with social media, they love the doom and gloom, but it's very cool to see that things are being done to try to expand the housing market because I agree, I think everyone deserves to have the ability to purchase something and not make it extremely unrealistic for the majority of individuals. But no, that's awesome though. So that would be something that maybe a retired couple or retiree could do, or a very, first time home buyer that just wants something semi-permanent, move in where they can have, they can start their family, where they can start living out their dreams. That's fantastic though. That is awesome to know that things at least are moving somewhat to the left and right. Because I've seen some things which I would highly recommend not to do, but I've definitely seen a lot of those loans where it's like 1% down now, 0% down. I know Zillow had this this loan where you could put down 0% and then they would match 3%, and they put a secondary loan against your house when you purchased it. I'm definitely someone that if you can afford the down payment, try to put down as much as possible to keep those loans as low as possible. But I definitely agree that there needs to be more options, but only time will tell, right?
Yeah, and it varies per buyer. Sometimes you're gonna need, that down payment assistance. Sometimes you're gonna need some help with closing costs, and maybe that helps you get into a property now, and then later you're able to kind of do adjustments. So it varies, and I don't know. Maybe next week we can also talk about like SB9, SB13, just like ADUs and lot splitting and being able to also sell your ADU. Like that's interesting. Like that, I've never thought about building an ADU in my backyard and selling it and having my primary home. So lot of changes that
Wow,
are gonna come
interesting.
up.
Now that is a very interesting topic. Let's talk about that on our next episode. But besides that, thank you so much for your time, Jesse. Do you have any closing remarks before we end this stream?
No, I mean, you guys, if you have any questions on the mobile home financing, you could contact me and send me a question, and then I can definitely connect you with the right people.
Of course. And also, of course, if anyone has any questions or wants to know anything more about this information that we talked about today, the comments below definitely help. Please consider subscribing and liking this video. And until next time, though, Jesse, thank you so much and have a great day.
Likewise.